Hello, welcome to this tutorial. My name is TJ from Impact Gamers, and I'm going to be showing you a retro remake of a game called Missile Command, but we have renamed it to Missile Defense. So let's take a look. So, the aim of the game is to use our turret in the centre to defend our cities against the incoming missiles. If an enemy missile hits one of the cities, it is destroyed. If your turret is destroyed, it will be game over, as well as if all your cities are no longer remaining and have been destroyed. First thing, load up Clickteam Fusion. So, now we're going to make a new application. You can either do this on New Application on the welcome screen, or you can go to File and New, or the blank piece of paper just below it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the application properties. In the properties, in the window down here as displayed on screen, we are going to change the size of the application. We're going to make it a bit more widescreen, and we are going to select yes when prompted to change our frame sizes to match the application window. Now we're going to change the name of the frame, which you can do by just typing in where it says frame 1, or you can go into the about properties and you can change the name here. To go into frame 1, the simplest way is just by clicking on the 1 right next to the frame. Now that we're in our frame, we're going to place our first object. You can do that by double clicking in the blank space. You can go up to Insert at the top on the toolbar and go down to Insert Object and then select the object you wish to place. In this case we're placing in a backdrop. To change how the backdrop looks, you can either double click using the left click, or you can right click and go to Edit. Once on this menu, you can go to Import, which is going to allow us to import some art we've already got. Now here it says that our transparent colour is black. Now this is an issue because the background of our image is black. So we are going to change it using a double left click to a colour which does not appear in our backdrop. Now our image is set off from where we want it to be. So in the size and position properties, we're going to set the coordinates for 0 and 0 for X and Y, and we're making sure that our width and height are exactly as we want them. And now to help manage our assets, we're going to rename this one to background title screen, just so we know what its purpose is in the game. So now we're going to add a new object, but this one is going to be a quick backdrop. The image on screen, the one with the 4 paintings together, is the quick backdrop. We're going to place it in, and in its settings we are now going to change its colour. And now also click once and then once again, and that will allow us to change the size of the box. So now we're going to change the quick backdrop to be slightly see-through. So we're going to go into Properties, Display Options, and we're going to change the blend coefficient. We're going to alter the number, and we're going to set it so it is just about halfway at 100. This will allow it to look semi-transparent, and now it looks great. And just as before, we're also going to rename this object. And now we're going to add a different kind of object to our title screen, and this one is going to be called String, and this is going to allow us to add some text to our title screen. Now we're going to left click to place the string object into the frame. We're then also going to click again in order to resize it to fill the space that we're going to want to put the text. Now we're going to go into the strings properties and then into text options, and this is going to allow us to change the colour. So we're going to change it to white, and then we're going to go up here and change its font to a bigger size and to set it to bold. Now we're going to double click on the string object, and this will allow us to change the text. For now we're only going to add one instruction, but we will come back to this later to add more. And once again we're going to go into its properties and rename the object. And now we're going to go to the top of the screen and we're going to go into the event editor where we can start doing some of the coding. The first thing we're going to do is add a new condition. Now the new condition we need is to do with the start of the frame. So we're going to go into our storyboard, click start a frame. Now this is going to play before anything else in the level. And what we're going to want to do is add some sound. So we're going to right click here to add an action. And then we're going to play sample on loop. And we're going to go to browse to find the piece of music or the sound file that we wish to play on loop from the start of the frame. And when prompted for how many times we wish to play it, we say 0. This means it's going to play on an infinite loop. The next thing we want to do is add a condition where if we click, it's going to progress to the next frame. So we go to new condition, keyboard and mouse. We're going to say mouse, user clicks, and we want it to be a left click once, and then press OK. And now we want to add the action, which is going to be in our storyboard controls, right click, and go to next frame. And now to try this out, we're going to go to run and run application. And when we click, it quits out because we don't have a frame after that. Now we're going to go back to our storyboard editor, and this is so we can add a new frame. You can do this by either adding insert new frame, or we can click the number 2 and that will generate a new frame. We're also going to rename this one in the properties and call this one game. Now we're going to enter this frame. You can do this by clicking on the number 2. You can also move over here and double click, or you can right click in order to enter it. But the quick way is just to click on the number 2 and that will take you straight into the frame. So now we're going to insert another backdrop object. This one's just going to be a normal and not a quick one. We're going to left click to place it down, and then we are going to edit it by right clicking and going to edit. Now we're going to import some artwork we've already got by clicking the import button and then selecting the art we wish to import. And there we go, we have our background in our game. And again, don't forget to rename your object in the About properties. Now we're going to insert another object. This one is going to be a quick backdrop. And this one we are not going to use a solid color. So we're going to go over to its properties, its settings, and then we're going to go to fill type, and we're going to change it to something called a motif, which is a repeated pattern. We're going to change the pattern by clicking the edit button just below where it says motif. And again, we're going to go over to import, and we're going to add some artwork we've already got. Now we're going to reposition our quick backdrop, and we're going to do this by using our properties window. We're going to change its position for its X to 0, and we're going to change the Y coordinate to 0 also. And now we're going to change the size of it by making sure the width and the height match that of our frame. You'll notice that this object has been added on top because it's the one we've recently added. We are going to change that in a second, but first we are going to rename our object as always. Now what we need to do is arrange the object. So we're going to go to the top of the screen where it says arrange. We're going to go to order and then send it to the back. And there we go, it is now placed behind the other backdrop. If you ever move it and you want it to go back to its previous position, you can Ctrl and Z or go to undo here. But if you don't want it moving around the screen and you're happy where it is, go to arrange and select lock. Now we're going to insert an active object. We're going to go to Insert, New Object, and insert an active, and left click to place it. We're going to place it over here on the left side of the screen outside of the play area. We're now going to edit, and again we're going to import some artwork we previously made. Now for the object's hotspot, we are going to put it into the center, and for the action point we're also going to place it into the center. The center point is where the object will rotate from, and the action points are where things will spawn from that object, for example when you're launching an object. After renaming the object, we're now going to move into the event editor. Now, before we start by adding a new condition, what we are going to do in order to keep things a bit tidier, we're actually going to insert a group of events. And we're just going to call this one target, because this one is going to include all the code to do with our target. Now the first condition we're going to add is a special rule, and it is going to be always. We always want the cursor to follow the mouse. So we're going to right click for an action, we're going to go to position and set the X coordinate. We're going to go here to where the mouse is, and we're going to take the X coordinate from the mouse. We're then going to repeat the same thing for the Y coordinate by going to get the current Y coordinate from the mouse. Now we're going to make a new condition in order to hide the mouse pointer. How we do this is we go to New Condition, we're going to go to our storyboard editor and select Starter Frame, and then we're just going to right click and go to Hide Mouse Pointer. Now we're going to run to test that application, but we're just going to run the frame this time. So we start in this frame that we're currently on rather than starting from the first frame. Now we have an issue. If we move our mouse pointer too far away, the cursor ends up being destroyed. This happens because Clickteam deletes objects if they're too far from the frame. This is in order to save memory. In order to fix this, we're going to go over to the workspace toolbar. We're going to then select the cursor so we can bring up its properties and go into its runtime options, and then we're going to uncheck destroy if object is too far from frame, and this will mean now that it won't be deleted. Now we're going to go back over to the frame editor. If you haven't already at this point, make sure you now save your game and save all your progress so far. You do this by going to File and Save As, or if you've already created a file, just click File and then Save. We're now going to add into our game our turret. So we're going to go to Insert, New Object, and insert an active object, because this is going to be able to be destroyed and move around. We're now going to edit it and import our image of the turret. This time we are going to manually change the points of the hotspot and of the action point. So this is where we want it to rotate from, the base of it. But where we want things to spawn, we're going to use the action point and put it towards the front. This is where it's going to fire from. Now what we need to do is drag this slider all the way to the end. This will allow it to have the full amount of directions, which is 32, as the object can have. Now we're going to right click on the black square and create rotated directions. This will now make sure the object has an image for each of these directions. We're now going to move the turret to the middle. We're going to give it a name, and we're just going to call it turret. And then, to make sure that it is in the exact center of the screen, we're going to go to its position tab in its properties, and we're going to manually type in the middle of the frame. You could also lift it up a little bit if you wanted to. Now, we're going to go back to the event editor now, and we're going to insert a new group of events, and we're going to call this one turret. The first condition we're going to do is another always rule, and we're going to right click to add an action underneath the turret, and we're going to go to direction and look in direction of, and we're going to select the relative option and allow it to follow the cursor. We're going to make sure the hotspot's in the center of that, and then press OK. We're now going to go to run and frame just to test that, to make sure it is indeed following it. Make sure you close your test application, and now we're going to go back over into the frame editor to add a lot of different active objects. So we're going to insert a new active object, place it down into our level, right click to edit, and we're going to import our target. As always, make sure to rename your object, so this one's just going to be target. And now we're going to insert another active object, and this one is going to become our hit mask. This is what we're going to use to see if an object has been collided with or not. Now here we are going to make sure that the transparent colour is the same as the one we used on the edges of our image, because we only want the circle to be used. So we want to make sure that that becomes our transparent colour. Again, rename your object, and now we're going to insert another active object, which is going to be our player missile. So as always, we're going to import our player missile image. We're going to zoom in slightly with this image and move the hotspot, and we're going to place it at the base of the missile. We're going to increase the slider to the maximum like we did before, and create rotated directions. We're going to also add an animation disappearing, and we're going to add in our explosion. Make sure import as animation is checked. When the object is being destroyed in the game, it will play that animation. Now, we're going to go into the runtime options to make sure it's not created at the start. We're going to go into its movement properties, and we're going to change its speed to 80 and make sure it is bouncing ball movement. And then, as always, we're going to rename it. Now we're going to do the exact same for the enemy missile. It is also going to be an active. We're going to right click and edit. We're going to go in and import the image. All the same settings. I'm going to pop that to the base of the missile as before, increase the slider and create rotated directions. Also, we're going to add the same disappearing animation, so it's got an explosion as well. And when it says import as animation, make sure that is checked for both of them, for both the good or player missile and the bad missile. Make sure when you go to the settings and when you're adding the movement, you are selecting bouncing ball movement rather than physics bouncing ball movement. This is not going to be a game using the physics engine. We're now going to deselect the initial directions, and we're going to make sure that only the downward directions are actually going to be highlighted. Now we're going to add a new object, which we've not yet, and this one is called a counter. We're also going to place this outside of the play area, and we're going to give it an initial value of 2. And we're going to rename this one to difficulty. And now that we've got all these objects added into the game, we are going to go to our event editor again. And just in case you haven't, make sure you click the disk icon just to save your work. So now in the event editor, to make it so we can fire, we are going to go to new condition within the target group, go to mouse, user clicks just like we did earlier, single click left, and we're going to create an object. We're going to right click for an action underneath this box icon, and we're going to select target and make sure it is relative to the cursor. And you can see where it's drawn in the center of the cursor as the hotspot is for X and Y 0 and 0. Now we also want to create a missile, so we're going to right click for an action and we're going to make sure it's relative to the turret this time, but we need to make sure it is from the action point and in the direction of the turret. We also need to make sure our X and Y coordinates are set to 0 and 0. So now we want the missiles to always go towards the target. So what we can do is use the pre-made condition that says always to do this rule. So we're going to right click underneath the missile, direction, look in direction of, and we're going to make sure it's relative to the target. Make sure it's set to 0, 0. And now if the missile hits the target, it's going to be a new condition. So if the missile has a collision with another object, and that object being the target, then we are going to create the hit mask, and we're going to make sure it's relative to the target. And then we are going to destroy the target and destroy the missile, which will make sure it plays its disappearing animation. So now we're going to try that out. We're going to go to run and test the frame, and we're going to see if it fires and creates the hit mask. Great, that works well, and we will make sure that the hit masks are not seen later on. So there is one issue currently happening here. Sometimes the missiles are changing direction, and you may notice this when you're firing many on screen at once. What's happening here is if a missile hits a target out of order, it's upsetting the order of things, so we are going to have to add some restrictions to this. So how we're going to fix this bug is by inserting another condition to the same line. And what we're going to do is we're going to check the targets, we're going to pick or count, and what we're going to do is set it to lower. Now we want to make sure that there is not 3 or more missiles on screen at once, because this is causing the bug. So we're going to set it so that it can be 0 or 1, as in if it's lower than the number 2. And this is going to make sure that we can have up to 2 missiles on screen, but no more. And this should fix the bug. Because the first target currently still exists. So we're going to uncheck create at start so that it will not count that target. So this will allow us now to only fire 2 missiles in order to avoid the bug. As always, it's always good to save your work, so do that at this stage. Now we're going to move on to the enemies spawning or being created, and we are now going to make a new group of events right now. So now we're going to make a new condition, and this is to do with the enemy spawning or being created. It is going to be a special condition, and it's going to say X chances out of Y. So for X value, we're going to get the 2 from our difficulty counter, and for our Y, we're going to say it's going to be out of 1,000. This seems to work well for when we tested it. So we're going to create an action to say create an object. We're going to create the enemy, and we are going to place them outside of the play area. So now we're going to set the position to be moved immediately. We're going to right click to set an action underneath the enemy missile. We're going to go to position, set X coordinate, and what we're going to do is set a random range. We are going to set the minimum of the random range to 50, and we're going to set the maximum as 750. So within this range is where we would want the X coordinate to appear. So now we're going to make it so that the difficulty increases. So we're going to make a new condition. We're going to go to the timer and going to say every 5 seconds. So you can use the slider or you can type it in manually. So now we're going to right click underneath the counter to make an action, and we're going to go up to add to counter, and we're going to increase it by 1. So now we're going to run our frame, and as you can see, missiles will start to appear, so we know that it's working and they are starting with a very slow rate. But there is one problem with what we can do. So if we fire, you'll notice we can't actually destroy the missiles. So that's the bit of code we're going to add next. So we're going to make a new condition, and this is going to be a collision rule between the hit mask and other object being the enemy missile. And we're just going to right click to add an action underneath the enemy missile to destroy it. We're also going to right click underneath the player 1 icon and go to score, add to score. You can choose as many points as you want, but we're just going to add this amount. We're also going to add a part of an expression, so we're going to add, and we're going to get the current value of the current difficulty. Now if we run the frame, there is one problem. If you put down loads of hit masks, you'll notice that the missiles, when they collide with them, will be destroyed. This makes the game incredibly easy, so we have to get rid of this exploit. Also, we don't want the player to be able to see the hit masks, and we can't even see our score. We don't have the object in the game to display it. So new condition, we're going to go to our hit mask and collisions, and if it's overlapping the enemy missile, we're going to negate it so that it now means if it is not overlapping the enemy missile. And all we're going to do is right click to add an action underneath the hit mask and say destroy. We're now going to go to the properties of the hit mask, into its display options, and we're going to make sure that visible at start is turned off. This means now they'll be hidden from the player and won't appear on the screen. Now we're going to go back to our frame editor, insert a new object, and we're going to go down to score. We're going to place it just off screen at the moment, just so we can see it, and we're going to go to its type in its settings. We're going to change it to text, and then this allows us to change the text options, so we can change the colour of it and even the font and the font size. Now we're going to pop it to the top right. This way the numbers when the score goes up will always be displayed on screen. Now we get points when we destroy an enemy missile, and the hit masks are no longer displayed on screen. Now we're going to close our test application, and now we're going to add the final active objects. We're going to go to insert, active object, place outside the play area, right click to go to edit, and now we're going to import and, as always, add some pre-made artwork. So we're putting stopped in the stopped animation, and then we're also going to go to disappearing, and we're going to add a new animation for when it's been destroyed. And just like before, make sure it's imported as an animation. As always, make sure to rename the object. So we're going to call this one city. And we're going to add multiple ones by dragging them in from the assets bar. Another way of doing this would be to duplicate the object, as you right click and then click duplicate and type in the amount that you want to create. And now we're going back to the event editor to add the final bits of code. As always, make sure you've saved your work to keep it up to date. And now we're going to add a new condition. In this new condition, we're going to say if an enemy missile collides with another object, being the city, we want to destroy the enemy missile, and we also want to destroy our city. We're now also going to add a new condition, and we're going to make another collision rule with the enemy missile, saying collides with another object, being our turret. We also want to destroy the enemy missile, as well as our own turret. Now we're going to add a new condition, and we're going to say if the enemy missile, if the position of it, by testing its position, gets to the bottom of the screen, what we want to happen then is to also destroy it. So now we have it. If the enemy missile hits the city, our turret, or it even just misses altogether and leaves the screen, it will be destroyed. But we do need an end to the game, so we're going to say new condition. We're going to go to our cities, pick or count, and have all our cities being destroyed. If that happens, what we're going to do is fire an event. So after 3 seconds, we're going to launch the event, leave the double quotes, and we're going to call it quit. Now we're going to make a new condition for the turret saying the same thing. Pick or count, have all the turrets being destroyed, and then what we're going to do is fire the event, quit. It's very important when you do this piece of code that you use the exact same spelling for launching the same event. Now we're going to make a new condition on the timer, on event, and what we're going to do is say on event quit, and then we're going to tell it using the actions what's going to happen. And we're going to go to storyboard controls, jump to frame, and we're going to select our title screen. So now we're going to test our application. We're going to click to start, and then we're going to see if the game is working and make sure all the rules work. Also, we need to do this to check the rules work for ending the game. So after the cities have been destroyed, or our turret, it should then quit the game for us and take us back to the title screen. And there we go, after 3 seconds we've been taken back to our title screen. Now there is one issue, because when we start the game again we continue with our previous score. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to the starter frame line of code we added very early on, and we're going to set the score, and we're going to set it to 0. This will restart our score. So now we're going to go back to our storyboard editor so we can go into our first frame. This is where we're going to add our instructions, which we started earlier but we said we'd come back to. We're also going to drag in the score, which we're just going to drag in from the workspace toolbar and leave it at the top. This will allow us to see what our score was before it restarts when we start the game again. Now it's always helpful to put in some instructions in your game, a simplified version of what you need to do in the game in order to win or how not to lose the game. Now, it's always handy to make sure you've tested your game to make sure anything new you add works. So we're going to go into our game to test it, going to increase the difficulty counter. This is going to allow us to test later on instead of waiting for longer for the missiles to spawn to then end the game. So get a little bit of score to make sure we have something to display, and then wait until we go back to the main menu and you can see now we have our score. But when we go back into the game, you'll notice it's been reset to 0, so this code works. So this next section is going to be to add some advanced things to your game. So if you want to add these extra advanced parts of the game, watch this section. The first thing we're going to do is add a bonus for keeping the cities alive. So we're going to go to our event editor, we're going to go to new condition, we're going to go to our timer and say every 30 seconds what we're going to do, we're going to add a bonus to our player score dependent on how many cities we still have. Now how we do this is we're going to say 50 points times, and then what we're going to want to do is get the number of the current amount of cities we have in the game at the time. Now another feature we can add is adding trails to our missiles. So in the original we had trails on the missiles. So how we're going to add this is by going into our frame editor, we're going to insert a new active object, we're going to edit it. So we don't actually want the stopped animation, so we're actually going to right click, go to delete and click yes. We're then going to go down to the disappearing, and now we're going to go to import, and as before we're going to import some artwork we already have. Make sure import animation is ticked and that the center point for the hotspot is set to the center. Change the speed of the animation in the direction options, set to 5 and click OK. Now we're going to go to the event editor and we're going to add a new condition in the target group, and we're going to go to every, and we're going to say 0 seconds because we just want 1/10 of a second. Now what we're going to do is create an object. Going to go to our trail and we want to create it relative to all of the enemy missiles. Also what we need to do is order it to the back. So we need to go and right click, go to order and bring to back. We also need to destroy it. This will play the disappearing animation. So now if we run the frame to test it, you'll see the trail is appearing behind all of the enemy missiles and it looks far better. Now we're going to add some sound effects. So we've already got our sounds downloaded. We're going to right click to add the sound, play sample. We're not adding it on a loop this time because these are just going to be sound effects played once whenever these events happen. Now because some of these sound effects that are going to play are going to be the same for a number of the different conditions, once we place one we can actually drag the same green tick to the ones we want to play the same sound. Even though we could use the same sound effect for quite a lot of these, just to make there be a difference for when our things get destroyed as a player, we can in fact add a different sound effect altogether. Also, you can make sure that you leave them both playing to have two sound effects playing at the same time. But what we're going to do now is add a rule for the start of frame, and we are going to play sample and loop it. And this time we're going to add a different sound, and this is going to be our background music. And now that we've added a whole bunch of extra things, we really hope you enjoy this game. please do visit the website on screen for help with the advanced version and resources for making this game yourself. We hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and that you look forward to more retro remakes. Bye for now.